Hello and welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. Have a couple of quick announcements before we bring on our guest for today. We have our March symposium tomorrow, so make sure that you grab your tickets for that event. And we also have the HitLab Innovator Summit coming up in May in person in New York City. Use the QR code or the link to grab your tickets for that event as well. And with that, we'd like to formally introduce our guest for today. Karen Habercoss from University of Chicago Medicine. She's the Vice President of and Chief Information Security and Privacy Officer. As you know, we love questions here at Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. So if you have any for Karen during the conversation, please use the Q&A feature or the chat, and I will make sure that we get to it. With that, Karen, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Nina. It's a pleasure.
I can't wait to dig in and learn not only about yourself, about your journey, but also about the incredible work that you do. So maybe a great place to start off is if you could give us a little bit of a background. What kind of has your career journey been that has really led you to the role that you're at right now?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I have had a pretty unusual journey, I think, to where I've started today. Back in the day, many years ago, I started as a licensed clinical social worker in the Department of
Wow.
Psychiatry, working with pediatric and adolescent clients and patients who had psychiatric disorders. And so I did that for probably half of my career. And then left. I started at University of Chicago Medicine, so I've actually been there quite some period of time. And then left for a short period of time to work for a healthcare startup. And when you work for a startup, you wear many hats. So I started as, managing social workers and then took on compliance, among many other things, and began my privacy compliance journey in that role. And then went to work for the Joint Commission, which many in healthcare may know as an accreditation body for healthcare organizations. And really learned privacy and HIPAA and all of the compliance areas there. And then was recruited back to University of Chicago Medicine, became their privacy officer, and then took on an expanded role now in September as the information security officer as well. And so that's been my journey in terms of how I've come into my current position.
That is incredible and quite a journey. It's so interesting to see the progression. But we love, nonlinear or kind of non-expected career journeys. So I love that, Karen. I know there's so much I would love to kind of get into just thinking about you kind of as an individual, as a professional, kind of what that has kind of been like for you. But I think before we get into the personal journey, would love to learn. I mean, this you're in a very, very interesting role right now, especially now. I'm just so curious, what are kind of the most critical issues in data security and privacy that you're seeing? What's kind of top of mind for you, in this role right now?
Yeah, I mean, because I've been the privacy officer for quite some period of time, I had that connection already with the information security office. And at one point, our privacy program sat within the Office of Information Security.
Oh, nice.
So that was really how I began the journey in terms of understanding security itself and how that role played out. And so in terms of what I'm doing right now is really understanding what is happening in our world. So what are the actual risks that are happening? How does that fit in with the University of Chicago Medicine? We have a three-part mission where I'm at right now, which is clinical patient care, education and academics, and then of course research. And so I need to make sure that we're covering risks in both privacy and security across the entire landscape. And so we're tracking pretty heavily to the cyber performance goals that have been put forward, just to make sure that we are meeting those. We were looking at the notice of proposed rulemaking for the security rule and trying to figure out where that's going to go in the future. The privacy program has been pretty mature for quite some period of time. HIPAA itself has been around for a while. And so
True.
I think that those processes are pretty solid, although more recently there have been things that we're tracking to related specifically to reproductive medicine, for example, and what that looks like in the data privacy space. And then I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the elephant in the room, which is AI. And so another part of what I'm working toward here is I co-lead or co-chair with our Chief Data and Analytics Officer, AI governance, to make sure that privacy and security has a seat at that table as well.
Yeah, I'm so curious if you could share a little bit more. I mean, that is the work that you're doing is so, I mean, so needed, so topical, especially now. Kind of when you are kind of in that role or kind of doing the work that you're doing with the AI governance, I'm just so curious. I mean, how, like, are there any additional details that you can share? Is there kind of like a precedent that's already set, or is it really just you and your co-lead trying to, really figure out what this looks like for the University of Chicago Medicine?
Yeah, I mean, so what we've been working toward is our CIO and our CMO have been working on the overall AI strategy. So that's been in flight for a period of time right now. And so the idea of putting formal data governance around all of that strategy is something that we're co-leading on. And so that involves really what we like to call a lens from both the macro level, which is, sort of senior leadership and what their vision is for our AI strategy, and then pushing that down to what we're leading in terms of data governance or AI governance, really, for the rest of the institution at the micro level. So things like, what does our policy look like? So we've had a acceptable use for generative AI policy for a couple years now, but really putting more formal policy around all of AI, so not just Gen AI, or putting together an inventory of what are all the AI that are currently in place, and then what does that look like as we bring new AI capabilities into our organization and adding that to the inventory. And that inventory has risk levels assigned to the different AI technologies that we have. And we publish that so that people in our organization can actually see this is the AI technologies that we already have. And we do that to be transparent with everybody in our workforce, but we also do it so that people are not bringing on technologies that are similar to what we already have. So that's another area. We're also looking at things like contracting and modeling. So we have, because we're an academic medical center, we're developing our own models through the research space and through the healthcare operations space. But we also bring in AI technologies through our procurement process. And so we're looking at what are the contracts that we would typically need to have in place with any technology. And then what does that look like if the third party also has some sort of AI component? And so how are we assessing that from a privacy and security risk standpoint? How is that being intaked through our governance process? Are there things that we would go back to the governance process and say, this doesn't fit our strategy, or this is not something that we're comfortable with as an organization? So those are just some of the things on a micro level. And then all the things that everybody's looking at for AI, assessing to make sure that it's not degrading over time, or it's producing results that are valid or unbiased or fair and in the way that we would expect them to. So that's a pretty high level answer, but that's what we're doing.
No, that's so helpful. And I really love how you kind of delineated the overarching strategy that I think, I mean, so many people are talking about, but also just what does the implementation look like at that more micro level, and some of those tactics. So I think that was incredibly helpful and frankly, just so fascinating to me, just the work that's being done. And I mean, you have been in the space for quite some time, and kind of, especially I could only imagine seeing it in all of its lenses. I mean, I'm just so curious, how do you think from your perspective, like the overall industry, just healthcare more broadly, how have you kind of seen the evolution of just the approach to security and privacy? Because in the past few years, I mean, things just completely shook up, I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting, right? Because privacy and security are typically seen as the departments that pause things or, people, I don't think this is true, but the perception, I think, of other people
Hmm.
is that we're the people slowing down innovation or
Yeah.
or we're saying no. And I just, I work really hard to not give that perception. I think it's really important for us. And I think maybe because I was a clinician first and foremost in my career, I understand the workflow of patient clinical care. And
Hmm.
so that is really first and foremost when I'm working in the privacy and security space, which is this is not going to go away. And
Yeah.
things are going to continue to innovate at a speed that most of us are not comfortable with. And so that is the way of the future. And so we need to figure out a couple things. I think we need to figure out how to be a partner to our business. We say that we are,
Mm.
but we actually need to act on that because we want people to come to us and tell us about what they want to do well in advance so that we can
Right.
put the guardrails in place, we can secure it, we can tell them about the data governance, for example, or how that should look. But
Hmm.
we don't want to do that, the week of implementation, for example. Like it would be
Right.
nice when they come to us months in advance when contracting starts. And so I think that's one of the things that's been pretty great about what we're doing here at University of Chicago, which is because I'm the security and privacy officer and I'm also co-leading on data governance, I get to see
Mm.
everything from the beginning. And so we get to have, conversations around what does this look like, or does the data governance for this project need to be different than what we would expect for it in other ways? And so that
Hmm.
seat at the table is really helpful, I think, as the privacy and security person for my organization. I also think that this topic requires specifically privacy officers, but maybe also to an extent security, to really dig in and upskill themselves on what
Hmm.
artificial intelligence really is or what it means. Because I think it means things to different people and there are different parts to it. And some of it is black box, and so you don't really know how it's even working. I also think from a security perspective, the barriers to entry into AI, even by malicious actors, are pretty low. And
Mm.
so I think it makes things more challenging, but we need to figure it out because, as I
Yeah.
mentioned, it's not going to go away. So we need to figure out how to partner and put the guardrails in so that the business can use it safely. And especially in terms of patient clinical care, patient safety.
Right.
I mean, I think when I think about privacy, I think a lot about regulatory requirements. But when I'm
Hmm.
wearing my security hat, though there are regulatory requirements I'm responsible for, the business needs to see that separate because that's a
Right.
patient clinical care, patient safety issue, an operations issue, financial implications, strategic operations. They're just different lenses of the same areas.
Absolutely. And you honestly just gave us a great playbook of what it means to really, stand up this type of governance structure or just office. I love some of the things that you mentioned, really speaking to just, bringing, privacy, security, these teams on earlier so that and that fact that you get to really be there from iteration, pulling it forward and making it an iterative process from the beginning, the upscaling, kind of the partnership. I think all of those are just such core pillars that you're really speaking to. And I can only imagine the fact that, like you were saying, you have been and have a clinical lens, to that really you are able to see like this is what an end user is thinking as well. So I think I could only imagine just how powerful that's been for you.
Yeah, I think it's been really great and really interesting. And when you think about career trajectory, there are lots of things that happen. So if you would have asked me years ago when I was a clinical social worker that I would be in this space, I would never have imagined. And the second iteration of my career now being in privacy and security. And
Mm,
now, if you would have said to me, you will be leading AI governance, along with your analytics officer, that would not have been something I would have imagined either. So I actually personally love challenging um,
yeah,
topics and things that help me to think and really critically think about things. So for me, it's exciting to be in this
I love
space
that.
right now. And I think healthcare is in a transition period now with all of this
Mm,
innovation. And I think, a lot of people are questioning, is this the right path forward, or is this really
right.
going to be as groundbreaking as everybody says it is? There's a lot of hype around AI, and some people are obviously questioning, is that real? And so I think, I don't know that I have the answers to that necessarily, but I like that I'm part of the conversation.
100%. And I really like to, as you're kind of describing a little bit more of just about kind of the more recent work that you've been doing, the fact that, you're just so intentional and really wanting to lay a foundation, I think already is, I don't know, it's very reassuring to me too, to see just all of the thought that is behind kind of every step when we think about innovation and how there's really so much intention and clarity. So I think that's also really, really important too.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the other things that I think is important that privacy and security can lead on in this space, we already in the healthcare space do a lot of education, right? Like we do, we're required under HIPAA to give education, new employees, and annually typically is what most people are doing. And people know us through that lens of education.
Right.
Or sometimes people do, the monthly phishing education, the testing around that.
Hmm.
Those are very common things. And I don't know that it's so much of a stretch for our groups to partner with others in the AI space as they begin to train their workforce, and not
I
just
like that.
privacy and security, but the entire workforce to becoming more AI literate is really,
Yeah.
the most impactful way to say it. I think if we are expecting our workforce to use new technologies in a way that meets the regulations that we already have for privacy and security, then we need to train them to become AI literate so that they know the things to watch for. And I think that, from my perspective, is probably one of the best ways. If people are not, don't have a seat at the table proverbially, then, that would be the first inroad. It would be to help with that training, or upskilling of the entire workforce to understand, how does AI work? We don't have to go into depth, in it, but we
Yeah.
need to at least explain to people, here are the things that happen with publicly available AI. Here's what it means to contract from an enterprise perspective. Here's what it means to host AI locally within your own system. And the differences in terms of privacy and security of those things is vast.
Right.
But our workforce doesn't understand that at all.
I think that's so incredible. And if there was any kind of training or education, I would 100% be signing up for that. I think that's a phenomenal idea because you are right. I mean, it is something that it's here to stay. And there really is, I mean, I can even just speak personally, there is very much, I feel like my own AI literacy gap. So I think that's a great idea, Karen. I love it. I Yeah, I also wanted to ask you a little bit too. I mean, I know we've been talking so much about the incredible work that you're doing, but would love to just learn a little bit more just as an individual, as a professional, just kind of, rising through the ranks and just having, I like how you mentioned like just you have like your own distinct chapters almost of your career journey or your career story. Would just love if you could share a little bit more around like your experience of what this transition has been for you, kind of from where you started with, your clinical roots to now in this space. And I think there's very much a perception, in my case, an incorrect perception around like places like security, privacy being kind of more quote unquote male dominated. So would just love your thoughts of, what your experiences have been as you've kind of been navigating these various chapters of the career story for you.
Yeah, I think this is true. I actually think about this a lot because I've had such an unusual journey. And I think that when I think back, for me, the things that were most helpful or most impactful. I mean, it's really centered around the opportunities that I've been given because I've been open with the people around me about the experiences I would like to have. So really, this is going to sound novel, but it's not at all. It's just telling the people around you that your interests and being open about that. I think that also there's two other things that I think have been important for me, especially as a woman, in this particular field, in both fields, really. And which is interesting because as a social worker, it's pretty much the other way. Most social workers are female and not male, so it's a
Mm-hmm.
very interesting dynamic to move from one to the other. But I think that mentorship has been important to me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have had a fantastic mentor over the years that, I would really credit with teaching me pretty much everything I know, at least in the security space. And then I had a separate mentor in the privacy compliance space. So those two people have been really instrumental in my career. What I think has been even more important than mentorship, because those mentors are pretty easy to find, I think, when you tell people what you're looking for, is this concept of sponsorship as a woman. And so
Mm-hmm.
finding people in your organization or even in another organization where you might be interested in working, who will stick up for you, who will say your name in rooms where you are not at, or who will know because you've already told them these are your areas of interest or there's where you would like to go, who will watch for opportunities or who have seen your career progression or who know what you're capable of achieving, who will actually go out on a limb for you and tell people or inform you of positions or connect you with people, or even in your own organization, allow you to have that seat at the table
Mm-hmm.
when others might be having meetings, for example, and they don't think to always include certain people. It's not that they're being not inclusive, it's just that, meetings can get large if we include everybody. But it's really great to have a sponsor to say, I also think we should include this person
Right.
because I think, they would make a great addition to this committee, or this person is somebody that I know personally, and I think you should consider them for this position. So that idea of sponsorship to me has become something that I've been telling all kinds of women about when I talk about my career journey. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
sponsorship has been very impactful to me. And to be clear, my sponsors have been mostly women, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be a woman. It could be a man too who's sponsoring, who's saying those things about you in rooms where you're not in.
That is incredible advice. And I think just really speaking to the delineation of having mentorship and sponsorship. And I'm so curious because I think it goes great segue into my next question, which is any kind of advice that you have, any words of wisdom, as just for maybe folks on the call that are either looking to transition into a new space or just maybe even into a role like this, kind of in the cybersecurity and privacy area. Are there any kind of other just career advice or words of wisdom that you can share with us?
Yeah, and besides what I've already said, I think it's important to network with people.
Love that.
I'll just speak for myself. I'm pretty awkward. Just if you met me, they may not seem like it here because people are always
Not
like,
at
like,
all.
oh, but if you met me in some I don't know, professional arena, I'd probably be shy and not who I look like right now. But that being said, I have spent a lot of time pushing myself to meet new people and, really just informing people what my areas of interest are, so that they know. And so I think doing things that are hard or uncomfortable, this is really cliche, is really where the growth happens. But
Yeah.
that's the truth. I mean, people won't know who you are, what your areas of interest are, unless you tell them. And what we look like Now I'm going back to my social work roots. What we might look like online or what people assume about you may not be actually that until you
Hmm.
put yourself out there and meet people.
100%. And I think something that you were saying just really resonated with me. Just the I think broader idea of like it's okay to just take up space and to kind of show up for yourself and really kind of like you were saying, people won't know until you tell them. And I think, at least for me, that's definitely something that is also resonating with me of just a good reminder as well. I know are short on time. I have so many questions that I want to ask you, but I do want to still allow some of our audience members to get their questions answered as well. So the first question I want that we have from one of our audience members is, if you're hiring, I think that we have a lot of folks that are really, really fascinated with the amazing work that you're doing.
Yeah, I have a couple open positions now, not necessarily reporting to me, reporting to a couple folks on my leadership team. So I would encourage you to go to University of Chicago Medicine's website. The careers page will have that, or to the point that I just said, reach out to me separately and let me know who you are, what your interests are. And we will be having our team will be expanding in the next few months as well, because we have some new initiatives that we want to run. And so even if there is not something that looks appealing to you right now, if you again let me know, then I can keep that in mind.
I love that. We have another question, which is health data breaches have gotten a lot of attention lately, kind of in the news. Do you conduct any kind of regular vulnerability assessments or penetration testing? That was kind of more the question.
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes. Everybody who works in this space should be doing vulnerability scanning, should be doing both internal and external penetration testing. So can people get in from the outside, and then how do they move laterally in your system are very important things for anyone in privacy and security to know. So that's probably not unique to me.
Awesome. Well, wonderful. I want to thank you so much, Karen, for just taking the time to chat with us today. I mean, I already have felt like I've learned so much, and I'm honestly very excited. I think there's just so much incredible opportunity and innovation in this space, and you all are doing so much of the work to get it off the ground. So it's very, very exciting. And just thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me, Nina.
Thank you so much, Karen. Make sure you join us next week for our next Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. Wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsors for sponsoring this incredible conversation, as well as one last huge thank you to Karen for sharing all of her insights and words of wisdom with us. We will see you all next week. Bye, everyone.